It's time for our Breaking Bad segment, and we love you, everyone who listens to our full podcast every week. We love you, everyone who watches on YouTube. We also give a special welcome to listeners of our new mini podcast, Practically Culture Breaking Bad, which you can find as its own feed on iTunes and on practicallyculture.com. Our regular viewers and listeners will know that both you and I have had our issues with this season of Breaking Bad at times, Bob. Not all the episodes have been great. So I ask you, Bob, with this episode, are you happy with it, or are you disappointed again?
Ooh, the polar opposites. This one I was okay with, but as you like to say, and I like to hear you say, sometimes it's almost worse to be lukewarm about something rather than hate it or love it. And this is kind
Yeah.
of almost falling into that category where I see where they're going, and I'm like, okay, I guess this is fine, but I don't love it.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
I am happy with this episode. We're back, baby, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, okay. It solved some issues for you. Cool.
Yeah, so where to start? How about with Walt's misadventure, since he's where I at least have had most of my issues this season. This isn't quite what you were saying, but along the same lines, I wouldn't say I enjoyed this episode in the sense of feeling good after I saw it. But you know me, if a show makes me feel like shit, I take that as a very good thing. So instead of saying I enjoyed it, I'll say it was a very honest and fearless episode. Those are the words that I want to use to describe it.
Nice.
The thing is, this finally is the Walt I know. Saul meets Walt in the vacuum repair shop. Walt thinks he can save his family and get them the money, and everything will still work out fine. Saul tells him, some real talk there, that the best thing he could do for his family is to stay and turn himself in. But here we go. This is what I've been waiting for this whole time. We see that Walt doesn't really put his family first when it comes down to it, because he leaves.
Yeah, well, at least he doesn't put his family first for now. He takes a long time to decide what he wants to do, and probably doesn't put his family first anymore the way it's going, but we'll get to that. I like that exchange between him and the two of them there in the cell. Is that what it was, the cell where they were staying, I guess?
Just the basement.
Basement apartment. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where were you going?
uh, well, at this point, in fairness, I think he was telling himself that he could make it all work, that he could not stay and get arrested, and he could still help his family the most. But at the same time, Saul does bring that up, and he decides not to go with what Saul says. If we do fast forward to the end, after Walt finally realizes his family doesn't want his help anymore, he
hmm
seems resigned to going back and turning himself in. Like, maybe Saul was right. Maybe I'll go, face the music. Maybe that's what's best for my family. But he doesn't do that. Because he's sitting there with his glass of whiskey. He just barely calls the cops on himself. And then he sees Elliot and Gretchen. And what do? They say that, oh, Walt wasn't a very big part of this company. All he did was give his name. That's it. Oh, well, that is it, huh? This is what motivates Walt even more than family. Respect. Empire. Winning. So right there he changes his mind. And at this point, I think there's no way he can really tell himself that whatever he's planning to do is best for his family. He realized turning himself in was how he could help his family just a minute ago, and his new impulse, whatever it is, we don't know exactly what he's going to do, but it's something else other than helping his family, something more important. And in my mind, it reminds us how much of a hypocrite Walt is deep down. And I like that because I feel like it's more honest about Walt.
Yeah, I remember my thought now. We were all tricked, weren't we, toward the end of the last episode? I think, at least I was, I'll be the first to admit that I thought that he was telling Skylar off for real, but really that was all a show to try to protect her and get her to be as little as possible involved, at least from the perspective of the investigators and that sort of thing. And I thought that was I don't want to use the word brilliant, but it worked on me. I totally fell for it, and then it pulled back and revealed that the character was being more consistent than originally I had thought. I thought maybe he snapped too fast, and then now we see that he actually was trying to protect his family as a last-ditch effort. Well, a lot was going on because he stole the baby. It was just really confusing, and to see a whole new
Yeah.
perspective on it, I like it better now after having had it set in and see this other layer. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. I mean, last week when we did this, neither of us really had time to really process the episode or just our immediate reactions, and it was late at night, and we were in the middle of technical difficulties. So I'm with you. At the time, I was sort of thinking that he was upset and mad. But I will say, as I thought about it and actually watched it a second time, I could see at the point that he was trying to let her off the hook. Um, but it took me a second watching, to be quite honest. So I'm right there with you. And I did notice at the time. I remember that he was working not to give them something that they could really get him on. There wasn't really admissible evidence against him either. And I guess he was trying to make that extend to Skylar. And it looks like, as far as that part of his plan went, he did okay.
Yeah, as good as can be expected. I mean, she's still kind of under watch, and there's a trial pending. There's a lot of things going on, and I mean, let's be honest, he really fucked over his family in the end. There's no way that at this point he can do any good to offset the harm, right? I mean, he's trying to like salvage. He's reaching, but at least he's doing the best he can for all the stuff that's out of his control, and he's doing what he can for what's in his control.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. In fact, that was what I was trying to say earlier. The only thing he could do to ease their lives a little bit would be to turn himself in. He was this close, and then he decided not to because of his ego, not because of some better plan to help his family. No, just because of his ego.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess split personality, two-faced people who think that they're, doing things for the greater good of people they love when it's really for them. I mean, that's a pretty complicated theme that I just tried to simplify in a poor manner, but I think that's more true to the character than one way or the other, as it were.
So, well, what do you think? Do you think Walt is aware of his hypocrisy or his two faces, or is he sort of telling himself that he's not really a hypocrite and he's lying to himself about the difference in motivations that he sometimes has?
Oh, I think he was mostly lying to himself, except for this very end scene of this episode. I mean, this is easy for me to say because it's fresh in my mind, and others could disagree and point to other areas where it started earlier. Um, but I think at this point, there's no lie to himself. Like he knows whatever he's going to go and do to get back at Gretchen and Elliot. He knows that it's way off and left field, has nothing to do with anything, and it has nothing to do with his original goal of his family. I think he's known that all along for a lot of other things he's done, but he's been lying to himself about those. And I know we're kind of peering into his mind a little bit, but I don't think he even cares to lie to himself. There's no point for this last one, for at least.
Well, you threw something in there, something that I have a question about, but you threw it in there rather declaratively. You think he's
Oh,
going after Elliot and Gretchen? That's his plan? His gun and the ricin and all that's for Elliot and Gretchen?
yeah, I guess I sort of implied that, didn't I? That was just me jumping the gun there on my conclusions. The way this show has been developing, I've been wrong several times before, so
Yeah,
it's
we all
possible.
have.
Yeah, maybe that's just way too obvious, and this was just a catalyst, and it's really for him to do something else. But quite honestly, between where the scene left off and where we've seen the flash forwards from earlier, there's got to be a lot of twists and turns for it to be something else that all of a sudden he's gonna yeah, this is gonna drive him to do something completely differently. I don't know. Do you have any other theories that how this ties into triggering something deep down inside as a catalyst and it's unrelated?
Yeah, well, I
'Cause
mean, all the caveats that you put in there, I mean, I have no idea, but that won't stop me from answering. Um, I sort of assumed that it just reawakened the Heisenberg empire builder winner ego maniac, and he is reinvigorated to go take on Jack and his crew. That's sort of what I figured, just because it seemed uh, like how could he have a plan to get Elliot and Gretchen? He'd have to somehow maybe he knows where they live, but somehow get his big gun and his rice and caplet in there, and I don't know. That just seems like too big of a project for him to just decide to do on a whim. Um, but maybe he's going to prove them wrong by being remembered in a different way than just the guy who had the white part of gray in the name of their company.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is that's going against my, you know, taking the bait for the easy sort of assumption is that Gretchen and Elliot, who the fuck cares about them? Like they're like a sideshow compared to a lot of big characters and themes that need to wrap up. If this is how it ends, him like going after them after we forgot about him for like a whole freaking season or two, that would seem a little over the top, anticlimactic in some ways. So there's still Jesse hanging out, and Jesse, of course, has the connection. There's a lot to talk about here with the gang that Walt wants to take out, and so that would see. This is me like thinking more about the fact that it's concluding as a show rather than what would really happen, but. It would make sense to fit into an hour of TV, him somehow getting involved with the gang, and then facing Jesse again as a final showdown in some ways. So that makes more sense in terms of what the TV show has been going for.
Yeah, I think you have a very good point. It'd be totally out of left field if the culmination, the finale, is him going after Elliot and Gretchen. It just would be like, huh? What?
Okay.
So yeah, well, so why don't we talk a little about Jesse, huh? So wow, I almost feel bad. I feel complicit for what's going on with him because I have secretly wanted him, maybe even not so secretly wanted him to survive this whole time. When
Oh wow.
he was asking the Nazis to just end it there, and I feel like yeah, you know what? Maybe it's better for Jesse just to kill him and get him over with it. So it's like for me wanting him to stay alive, this is what befalls Jesse, and so I feel guilty for that.
Oh no, I think that's okay. I mean, he's been alive way longer than he should have been anyway, right? But
That's true. But yeah, so in this episode we see him ninja a paperclip to escape his handcuffs and climb out of his hole, only to be caught. And so what do they do to him? They just go and kill Andrea to teach him a lesson. Brutally. Sort of how he killed Gale, actually, except way worse.
right. This is one of those complicated, mixed emotion sort of scenes and plot points that the way it played out, I was like rolling my eyes, annoyed, crying, almost all together in some ways. At least those are all the emotions that sort of came together, because the whole paperclip thing, that seemed like we need a way for him to try to escape a paperclip with a photo that they left there for him. Like that hasn't been done in like a million movies before. Is the one way to get out of handcuffs. That convenient that the one-dimensional bad guy leaves a paperclip. Exactly what I need, MacGyver style.
Do
So
paperclips even open handcuffs? It seems like in police stations, when people are handcuffed, they'd be able to grab paperclips like all the time.
yeah, either police stations are like paperclip-less, or yeah, this is a farce. I don't know. We need to look it up on MythBusters or something, but I've always assumed they do just because I see it all the time, but what do I know? I'm just living the movies.
Yeah, who knows?
But anyway, so that was an eye roller for me, and that sort of was one of the things that bugged me about this episode. Some of the plot point devices that sort of had to move things along that were sort of sloppy like that. But then the way it plays out, he ends up getting caught and doesn't get to escape. You want almost in that scene, you were kind of, at least I was like, "Run, Jesse, run! I want you to escape. I think it's going to be cool. It's going to be more interesting. This is what we all want in the moment." But then, as I think about it, maybe that would have been too easy of a thing to have happen, and so he gets caught. And then this whole Andrea thing really was just like unexpected for me. I didn't expect it at all. How about you?
No, that is not what I thought, especially that they would go to it so quickly and so openly. Because they went from the sort of insinuation that, oh, yeah, we know these people who are close to you, so you better do what we say, to all of a sudden just, oh, well, he tried to escape. Boom. Don't forget that Brock is still alive. Although, yeah, I was just thinking half the time, or part of what I was thinking was they just, used their threat up. Brock is still alive, but Brock's going to be like picked up by an aunt or Child Protective Services, and he's not going to be able to be gotten to by Jack's crew or by Todd very easily at this point. So it seems like they almost lost their leverage by using their leverage so quickly. That was the thing that was a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah, that surprised me too because and Jesse has been more and more unstable and emotional, and this isn't gonna make for another 92% batch, if you know what I mean. Like he's hurting. He's in a bad place. It's not so simple to just do that and then like do back to work. Tomorrow we got a big day. Now that it's the middle of the night and you haven't had any sleep. So I don't know, and it's really interesting that we have some of these slowed down scenes that are right in the immediate future or not or present, I should say, and then we have the Walt elapsed time, which I guess they switched back and forth a little bit, but I guess I need to watch it more closely. But I guess they only fast forwarded after we were done with Jesse, so we still don't know what's happened to Jesse for the last few months, right?
Yeah. So if we we've gone all over the place here chronologically, but Walt was certainly
Eh,
in that.
show has two.
Walt has certainly been at least for 2 months in his place, right? At least because there's no list except what Home Slice could have gone and picked up in the next month, and then he brought it the third month, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's been at least 2 months there. Who knows what could have happened to Jesse? Seems unlikely that he would have lived that long. One or two more cooks would be all of the Nazis need from him, I would think. The diminishing marginal return of every cook after that seems like it would go to zero pretty quick. So what are they going to do with him other than kill him? Seems like.
Yeah, but of course that won't work for back to me just second guessing how the show's going to end. That wouldn't work for the way the show needs to end. So anyway, maybe we're too off into, and I started this, we're too off into speculation territory, but that's the problem with shows wrapping up. You almost want them to wrap up without you knowing that they're wrapping up. It's so hard to hold on here at the end.
Just end like, oh, that was it. That was it, everyone. Hope you liked that ending.
You missed it? Oh, sorry. That was the end.
I will say though, as much as I've had issues with some of this season, I'm actually pretty forgiving of plot weaknesses. So like the paper clips with the handcuffs, I'm actually willing to suspend my disbelief on that, even though who knows if it stands up to scrutiny. And I'm willing to just go with it with Todd killing Andrea like that. I'm trying to think why I was bothered by other things, and I think that it's if I feel like the characters wouldn't do that, at least the way they've shown the characters develop and progress in the show. If they make a choice that doesn't feel right, then that's what I don't like. But I can actually live with implausible plot points. I find myself reacting that way.
I think that's an important distinction, actually. I'm glad you brought it up that way. Because there's some other things that bug me a little bit, but they sort of fall into moving the plot forward for the genuine characters to interact, which is more important.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, the whole Nazi team and the way that they feel kind of one-dimensional, and Todd as a character is only sort of working for me. I think I said in a previous episode he's kind of too little, too late, but he's really important to just hinge a lot of complexity together that we'll just call bad guys who do meth. You know, that's all summed up in this one group of people.
Yeah,
Um,
except just to throw this in there, if anyone's going to be the winner of Breaking Bad, it seems like it's going to be Todd, right?
well, we don't know yet.
Like
I mean,
he wins the show. We have one more episode to go, but that's what it what it almost seems like. He's in the good position to come away as the winner.
right, the young creepy guy who made a career choice young, you know, like he's walking away. But that's another thing that sort of bugged me in terms of needing plot to move forward and keep Jesse alive for bigger things to happen to him later. When when Todd's uncle was like, "All right, let's take Jesse out," and then Todd's like, "No, we still got all this meth to cook," and he's like, "What are you talking about? We just won the lottery. Let's cash in." And then he gave in to his nephew, who was the young wise dude who I don't know, like maybe I'm just not greedy enough, but I'm sort of with Todd's uncle. Like, yeah, how many millions? Tens of millions of dollars? Was it like 70 million? It was a
Like
lot.
69 or something. I mean, around 80 minus 11. So,
Yeah.
um,
Um,
yeah, I mean, if 5 million was enough for you, then you'd think 60 plus million would definitely be. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. I just. So what am I trying to say here? So Todd is really shown a lot of initiative and been a real go-getter in this whole thing too. I wonder if Jack is sort of letting Todd get his way because Todd's the one of the crew that has the chance to be the leader after Jack's gone or something like that. So he's letting him be, the vice president and make his own choices. I don't know.
Yeah, and it looks like Todd is driven by just wanting to be closer to Lydia more than the money anyway, which is kind of funny because so he uses the money to try to get his uncle to listen to him, and then his uncle, I guess, sees through it and says, "Oh, it's because you want this woman." And then it's like, "Okay, fine, I'll change my plans. Yeah, no big deal. We're gonna run a crime syndicate, that's proven to get everyone else killed involved, and we're going to do it the right way, even though we already have $69 million because you want an older woman that you'll never get." And it's just like, what? What just happened?
Well, it's interesting that had to be the reason, right? Because I just remember in the episode when they took all this money from Walt, he said, "Don't get greedy; it's unattractive." So it seems like Jack is one of his values is to not be too greedy, and that's why he's fine with having enough money, whereas Walt wasn't, whereas Todd isn't. So it had to be some other reason, like a favor to Todd, to keep it going, other than greed.
Yeah, I guess so. But then, I guess we're probably beating it to death. But it felt like maybe it's just because I don't know these characters well enough, and they're barely developed to have themes like that to hold consistent to. They're more just there as a catalyst to give a good reason for Walt to have all these complicated things happen to his family that we've seen for 5 seasons. So,
yeah. Todd also makes an appearance in the Skylar nursery.
oh yeah, that was creepy.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Skylar's never met Todd, right? I was having a hard time taking Todd seriously because it was obviously him underneath that mask. But if you're in Skylar's position, obviously you're going to take him seriously. But anyway, I just had a hard time there. But he was sort of the ringleader of that, even though there's no way he's the most senior of the crew. But Todd was one who did the talking, and he did a good job. I mean, I had to side with him against Lydia. That if you'd seen there, I think you'd see it differently. We put a real scare in her. Although, narratively, if we just take our step back and figure out why they showed us that, it seems like Skylar probably wouldn't have even thought to mention Lydia to the police, but now, since he's trying to rack her brain, as the attorney told her, the prosecutor, this gives her something to maybe say, and maybe she can get witness protection out of this or something like that. So ironically, Todd might have done himself a disservice.
Yeah, I mean, how does that work in the real world? If somebody were to come to you and say, "Don't tell the police something or else I'm coming for your baby," and you told the police that, when the first thing that would happen would make it so that person would have a really hard time to come for your baby? I don't know. Maybe not saying anything is protecting you more. Hard to say. I'm not one to judge those circumstances. I've never been in them, but
good point. I mean, I sort of assume that they don't just toss out witness protection to anyone just because they have one little thing, and they don't do it
true.
instantly. I mean, I don't know. It certainly is risky. I would think it might work. Or it might not work.
Right. Certainly, there's a window of opportunity for things to happen the wrong way while even stuff is being processed. Governments aren't good at protecting people super quickly. That said, this was pretty early after things were happening, and they had somebody watching the house, but they didn't have the house bugged. Especially given that theme through previous seasons, and maybe I'm nitpicking, but this is another thing I noticed as I was watching this as a plot device rather than nitpicking around that side rather than the characters. How hard would it have been to wire up that house, and how paranoid should have Todd been to assume that people are looking for Walt and any sort of audio in there was being covered? I don't know.
Well, again, caveat, I have no idea. That won't stop me from answering. So I'm thinking they didn't think they were going to get more evidence out of Skylar or her house. I mean, they had no reason to think Walt was going to show up there and have a conversation there. So that's probably why they didn't have it bugged. They didn't think something like that was going to happen. They were just watching mostly to make sure Walt didn't come back or Skylar didn't try to escape. Is what I sort of hypothesize.
Okay, I guess that's good enough. I don't mean to
I
keep
don't know.
finding things.
Let me be clear. I have no idea, but that's maybe an answer. Um, let's see. So, oh, I noticed that Jesse's confession was the first time that Jack's crew had heard that Todd killed that kid at the train heist, right? So,
Yeah, and they seem totally fine with it.
yeah, for a minute I thought it might be a problem for him, but no. At least he wasn't a crying pussy. That's what they really can't stand. Killers, fine. Crying pussies, bad.
Right, yes. Staying in line with
Um,
our bad guy motif here. They're bad guys. They're Nazis.
that's right. So, I don't know. Any predictions for the finale next week, Bob? I sort of hate to make any more. We've sort of talked about this and never quite pan out, but well, some basics. Do you think Walt lives?
Uh, no,
No, right?
I
How
don't.
can Walt live? He's got
Yeah, I mean, he's
cancer.
dying of cancer. It's the odds are 2 to 1 because he could either die before the show ends or he's just gonna die anyway. Um,
I love how you handicap that. He could have cancer, get killed, or live. So it's 2 to 1.
right, yeah. Having cancer and getting killed, totally different things. Um, I think Jesse has a chance of surviving, um, which I okay. So I'll just make my one ridiculous prediction, and then we'll see if I'm way off. I think that Walt is going to go back. Um, Epic showdown. I think Todd's going to die, and that gang somehow is going to get killed with the ricin, and then
Because
showdown
people
between
get what's coming to them in this show.
something like that, I guess. And then something's going to happen, and Jesse Walt showdown. Jesse survives. Show ends. Somehow
Jesse's the
there's
winner. You think Jesse's the winner
Jesse's
of Breaking Bad?
Jesse's the win. I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm saying that's what I think is going to happen. And then Walt's family isn't going to get anything really other than just screwed over. But Jesse, who's going to be totally messed up, is going to be able to move on somehow. Okay, epic prediction
Wow.
over. That's kind of way out there, but there's a chance. I took like a lot of different turns. I'm sure that one of those things I just said is right, even if like 5 are wrong.
I feel like we've seen a rather nihilistic, inevitability of ruthlessness winning out sort of theme here.
Mm,
So I'm sort of thinking Jack and Todd are going to win, to be quite honest. The one thing that I suspect may happen is that Walt will end up meeting Jesse, and somehow I think they're both going to die. But I think Walt might show some glimmer of humanity in there. I mean, I don't think he's redeemable after everything he's done, just because um, you can't just change your mind. I don't think this show believes in deathbed repentance. It shows the consequences of your actions are what matter, and
right.
the consequences of Walt's actions have been so terrible that there's nothing he can really do to redeem himself. But I feel like he might show that spark of humanity when he meets Jesse. Um,
Yeah, like run in front and like no, stop the bullet sort of thing, slow motion. Okay,
or
maybe
maybe
not like
just show
that.
some realization of how destructive he's been, and all for himself and not for other people, like he likes to think. Sort of vague, the sort of this sort of prediction, but that's about as much as I can say.
And what do you think happens to his family? Anything?
No,
Um,
nothing good. I think they're just basically how they are now. Just sort of their lives are ruined. Although I wouldn't be surprised if their lives get ruined even more. Someone gets hurt or something like that.
So let me ask you this: would you be surprised if there's any good news for anybody who isn't a bad guy?
Yeah, I would be surprised if there's any good news. I mean, it's significantly good news. Yeah, maybe it won't be 100% bad news, but it'll be more bad news than good news for everyone.
Brock gets all the money. No, I'm just making shit up.
Well, it's already bad news. Whatever happens to him, his
Yeah,
mom
I
is.
mean, there's nothing you can do to yeah. And by the way, when Andrea died, it was super sad, and it was a little bit of a shock to the system. It was a surprise. It was sad. But at this point in Breaking Bad, it happened, and I was like, there was part of me, I had two emotions. One was, oh my gosh, and the other one was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because it's only like the fifth like epic death a normal person involved in the triangle of these people. Um, so maybe it's good that they're wrapping it up because I don't know if we can do any more of those. It's too much.
Well, I always think little things like that are so interesting. How it's a show about how Walt, little by little, um, gets worse and worse and worse. So he's desensitized, and look where it leaves him. And then it shows us getting desensitized by going a little further each time.
That's actually a fair point. On that note, I do want to say it makes a more interesting interaction. You and I sometimes I'm reaching for things to complain about and I'm nitpicking on like the paperclip but overall like it's an enjoyable show. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't want to see it and want to see it succeed. I've really enjoyed the ride. We'll probably talk more about this in like an overall season recap, but it's easy to focus on the nitpicky things. But overall, I'm still very impressed with it. It's interesting, and I want to know where it ends up.
So let me ask you this: do you think that an A grade is in play for Breaking Bad for you if it sticks the landing?
An A grade for the whole show or for the season?
For the season, for this half of the season, I mean.
Oh, for this half of the season, I don't know if we can do much better than an A minus, which isn't that bad. But I feel like there have already been a few things that have sort of knocked it to the point where even if it sticks the landing, it's not going to be as good as some of the other seasons, which didn't have as many small things as this one has already had. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna polish that turd a little bit more than you are and say I suspect it'll be a B plus A minus, but I can imagine the ending being so brilliant that it bumps it up to an A. But it's gonna have to like get tons of extra credit on its final paper, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's hard to know what that means because I feel like there's so many mixed emotions and reactions to this show that you know you are going to think of it one way. I'm going to think of it another way. There's going to be an aggregate critic's view. There's going to be people who hate it, people who love it. I don't know. I'm starting to question what constitutes goodness in a show just because of this show and all the buzz that's around it. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it not quite as good? Oh, it's so much pressure. It's just a show.
Yeah, hey, well, we do that with movies and other shows every week. We reduce everything to one little letter, right? And so
That's
you got
true.
to do that with this
That's
one too.
that's true. Sorry to you TV show creators. That's just what you got to put up with when you put out, brilliant shows. Is people like us nitpicking and giving it grades.
So, anything else you want to say before we wrap up, Bob?
I'm excited to see the ending. That's it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think we're back on track for a solid ending. Hiccups are behind us, I hope. And this is probably the most anticipated finale since, like, The Sopranos, maybe Lost. I know that could have been a whole other discussion topic, I suppose. But anyway, I can't wait.
Awesome.